Earlier, we traveled to William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, to talk to Robert Gates, who is chancellor at the school. We began by asking him for his thoughts on Donald Trump.
Well, I have some real issues with things he said about national security policy and some concerns. I think there are some contradictions. You can't have a trade war with China and then turn around and ask them to help you on North Korea. I have no idea what his policy would be in terms of dealing with ISIS. I worry a little bit about his admiration for Vladimir Putin.
You've served 8 presidents. Are these the kinds of reservations that can be, are these policy position issues, or can they be fixed with a good staff?
And they're policy positions, so they can always change. I mean, I've seen presidents do that more than once. I guess one of the things that makes it challenging for me is that he seems to think that he has all the answers and that he doesn't need any advice from staff or anybody else, and that he knows more about these things than anybody else, and doesn't really feel the need to surround himself with informed advisors. You know, I worked for some very different presidents of those 8. You know, people would say, how could you work for both Barack Obama and George W. Bush? And I remind them, well, I worked for Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. The difference is each one of those presidents, as strong-minded as each of them was, understood he did not have all the answers and surrounded himself with experienced, thoughtful people who would give good advice, and they were willing to listen. They would often make their own independent judgments. They often would act contrary to the advice they were receiving. But nonetheless, they only acted after they had listened to different points of view and then had the opportunity to make up their mind.
Is that a fatal flaw?
I think that one would have to show between now and the election, it seems to me, that you were willing to do that. And willing to listen to people, willing to adjust your positions, to give any sense of confidence that, you know, I come into all this from the national security standpoint, and that's what I look at. I came to this interview from commissioning 18 brand new second lieutenants coming out of ROTC, and I think about all those young people in the military and who's going to be in charge of them. Who's going to be in a position to give them orders. And so I want to see some evidence that a person can be trusted with the lives of those young people.
Would you serve him if he asked?
Well, I learned a long time ago never to say never, but let's just say that would be inconceivable to me. Before the election, I will be 73, and let's just say I've stopped working on my resume.
But let's say you were a young Bach of 63. Would you? would it be an administration you could see yourself serving?
Well, I think there would have to be a conversation with the candidate to see. You know, when President-elect Obama asked me to stay on, we did something very unusual. We had this secret meeting in the firehouse at Reagan Airport in Washington, and I had sent him 10 questions, you know, and beginning with, why do you think you can trust me? And what are your positions on Afghanistan and the defense budget? And who's the rest of the team going to be? No matter what age I might be, those are questions that I think would have to be asked.
We'll have a lot more of our conversation with Secretary Gates later in the broadcast.